Ahem. Yo, welcome to your weekly forecast. My name is Oak. This is Absalom, the art of astrology and demon slaying. This is your forecast for Sunday, June 16 and onward. Here at Absalom, we are in the business of deepening in truth, the kind of truth that will be loving enough, but also will slap you upside the head enough. It's a gentle balance. If you like this show, if you enjoy these weekly forecasts and they tickle your fancy, they light you up and read you down, please feel free to leave a 5-star review. I really appreciate all of that type of support. It helps to keep the show going. Feel free to shoot me a message of appreciation. I'm also starting to do live readings, so only message me with your birth information if you are having a deeply burning question that you need support with, and I will be glad to hopefully address that on the show. So let's get into this particular week, which I am titling, I'm Changing My Name. So I had some thoughts in the shower yesterday, and it struck me very deeply. I was like, what if I just changed my name? You know, I have a pretty rough relationship with my own upbringing and just a lot of violence, a lot of abuse. And I was thinking about that break, that clean break of what would it be to completely claim and disengage? And there's value in that because a lot of mysticism and definitely astrology, and particularly in the Jyotish lineage, but astrology is an energetic alphabet, and that is true. So sounds also have the energy of the planets as well. And so you can have sounds that are misaligned for you. So that's why when people change their name, they have a completely different vibration. And your vibration determines everything about how you move through the world. And this is really important because, this week we have a full moon in Capricorn. And then a month from now, we have another full moon in Capricorn. And that means that within the Cancer season, there are going to be 2 Capricorn full moons. And I always find this very interesting because, the Capricorn full moon, every time it's Cancer season in the summer, the moon is in detriment. And I always wonder what that means. And I think that it shows that there is a genuine challenge for us to integrate fundamental parts of our identity and how that is aligning with our practical reality. And as an American, embarrassingly, as an American, there's so many things about what we celebrate during these national holidays that I just sincerely have nothing to do with. And so I thought, what if I changed my name? But also, thinking about the astrology for the upcoming week, I was like, wow, what does it mean for us to de-identify with our nationality? And that's the thing about Cancer is that, as we're moving into the solstice, and which Cancer season is the start of the summer, Cancer is a lot about nationality because it is where you come from. It has a lot to do with tribe of origin. And so all of us are bound by our nationality. And wow, we get to have these 2 Capricorn full moons, which, full moons are oppositions. We're really looking at this internal conflict that can happen, and in this idea of our nationality as a possible internal conflict. And so, there's plenty of information that we have right now that is making us severely think about, what does it mean to be an American, right? In the last week, remember how I was talking about that Jupiter-Pluto trine and just thinking about justice. And then last week, more information was revealed that I just pulled this from this Forbes article that was posted just yesterday. There are all these Supreme Court justices whose motives are being revealed, particularly Justice Clarence Thomas, who had received several luxury vacations for years and hadn't disclosed them. This article goes on to address Justice Samuel Alito doing similar. It also references Justice Sonia Sotomayor and Justice Neil Gorsuch. Also, they reference Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who has his own history of sexual abuse. But in the article referencing how he's been frowned upon by hanging out with right-wing conservatives. I just find it interesting how this article highlights just how many of our Supreme Court justices are potentially influenced. I mean, we kind of know these things already, but it is coming out into the public sphere. And that's what I was saying about last week. Additionally, that, Sun square Saturn, Mercury square Saturn, Venus square Saturn, there was going to be a lot of information that came to the surface. There was a lot of information actually just overall, like I was taking notes throughout the week. So for one, the Russian nuclear submarine that was in Cuba and is now somewhere off the coast of Florida, I believe. That's something that occurred, I think, right as the Mercury square to Saturn was happening last Wednesday, Thursday. So while this is a regular testing for the Russian military, I believe, just the timing of it is really interesting. And in addition to a few days later, when the announcement for a involuntary national draft for men aged 18 to 26, I believe, I was looking into the astrology of that. And the first time that a national draft was put into law was 1 year after the American Civil War began. So in 1862, and Neptune was at the first degree of Aries. Neptune is going to be moving into Aries next year, you guys. Neptune in Aries was present when we had the American Civil War. So just notating that. Now, another piece of information that I researched was the Selective Service Act of 1917, establishing a national army system in the United States as a mandate for any man that is 18 to 30 to register for the military. The degree of the sun for the date of that law being put into place was 27 degrees Taurus. And that is actually very close to where Uranus will station retrograde later on in the year. So that chart is pretty wild. I saw a lot of connective threads. I'm not going to go into it fully, but wow. Astrology, it just doesn't miss. And I will just take this time to let y'all know that I am still calling in the students that are ready to study astrology with me. My 12-month mentorship starts on July 21st, so in a month. And that is the full natal program. You can learn more about it on my website, oakastrologyschool.com. I basically teach astrology from the lens of healing, counseling, and using astrology as a tool for liberation. And this is pretty much like the main program that I offer. And if you have been wanting to really deepen in your study, that is available. So yeah, back to what I was saying. When you fight for something, you are fighting for everything that you believe that thing to represent. And so that is all tied up and that's all wrapped up in a name. So the idea of fighting for your country, I mean, you hear where I'm going with this, but just the level of disgust, the thought of all these young people that do not even inherently believe in the future of this country in the way that the generations before us have created it to be, exhausting. And this is, I believe that this is rather like the contemplation. There is a lot to contemplate. And I don't mean this as just like a general statement. Saturn is paused right now. Saturn will station retrograde next week, but as of last week, as of this week, Saturn is really slow. It is barely moving. And you know what that means? We are in a deep contemplation. Saturn tells us the movement of our work for the year. And so Saturn stationing retrograde, getting ready to station retrograde, really starts to signify this internal worry. There's certain fears that are coming up around, are we up to par with our work this year? And the retrograde signifies like the need to really organize our plans, and it takes a while for us to kind of get in that alignment. But what that feels like is it feels a little bit somber and it feels very heavy. It feels very serious. And so like in addition to this other thing that's happening with this national draft, it's like we are starting to kind of get all this messaging that, Project 2025, if you guys are following that, please look into it if you haven't heard of Project 2025. It is very alarming. But that coincides astrologically with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that happens in 2025. So there is a lot around the events of 2024 and how they're a prelude to 2025, which is where things are really creepy. So I haven't talked about that as much, but I will in the following weeks. We will get to the full moon and I will talk about it more on a personal level in just a moment. But I do want to say that, as I was mentioning, that there's a lot of information that was revealed in this past week. Just so much information about food recalls that's been happening for a while. I'd say since the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction has been building, but definitely a lot more of that data is just starting to come forward. Cucumbers are recalled, bottled water has been recalled. Not all, but in some areas and some retailers. Like it's just something to do your own research on. Last month there was like a huge beef recall. And so, when we're thinking about this idea of nationality, it's like, what are the things necessary for us to be well as a country, right? And like the food system is like a big part of that. And our safety as something that is also an indicator of what it means to be part of a nation. It means that you're held within the safety of that nation. And so safety from ailment is a big part of that. And as we are still in COVID territory, this is the detail that will bring us into the full moon forecast finally. But there has been a lot of information in the past month around just details from how COVID was managed. And something that I found interesting was that last month, Dr. Fauci, who was almost like the spokesdoctor of how to navigate COVID in 2020, he admits on the new moon in Taurus that featured Jupiter and Uranus conjunct, admits that COVID rules, the 6-foot rule and like all the things around COVID that he was suggesting were not based on science. And yet there's that. I mean, you can look into it. Big part of what happened when the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction were coming together was like one of the biggest brands for the COVID vaccine was taken off the market. And I'm not going to talk about whether that is good or bad. I'm just stating the information. But something that came out this past week was that an Al Jazeera article that I came across stated that the U.S. ran a secret anti-vax campaign to undermine China's COVID efforts. And this is particularly in the Philippines. So, the whole thing around the vaccine and the propaganda for it is the thing that I'm the most concerned with. I'm not here to tell you if the vaccine is good or bad, but one thing about these full moons in Capricorn, particularly the second one that occurs at the end of, July 21st, the one that occurs this week is going to be on Friday, June 21st. But that full moon next month is going to be oppose that 0-degree point where Jupiter and Saturn came together. And that was when the vaccine was released. So one of my big predictions that I've had in the past few years is that there have been a lot of activations to 0 degrees Aquarius. And particularly Pluto still going to be traveling over 0 degrees Aquarius at the end of the year and actually like at some point around the autumn time. So anytime that point is crossed over, we are going to get more information about the COVID vaccine, all the information surrounding it, in the same way that we're starting to get all these like little like post details that are coming up. So this is something that will be ongoing. And the reason why I'm even mentioning this is that Mars retrograde that happens at the end of the year will also be crossing over this space. So finally talking about this full moon forecast for the week is that I believe that a lot of the activity from this month, and I'd even say from the past 2 months, they're setting the stage for a lot of the activity that's going to be happening with this Mars retrograde. And that one, I feel like I need to do like a 6-month forecast because that one is going to be very, very telling. So there's much details about like a lot of these like celebrity things that have happened in the past 2 months and just all this random stuff that is happening, this chaotic stuff that's happening right now. Like we're going to see a lot of it culminate by the end of the year. And these full moons this month, I think that they just start to have us go deeper into a state of inquiry. So let's finally get into the week. We start off on Sunday, June 16, with Venus square to Neptune. By the evening on Sunday, we'll have Mercury squaring Neptune. And as we're in bed and getting our rest, Mercury and Venus will have ingressed into Cancer. So by the morning, I feel as though there's going to be this like delayed response of us waking up to a lot of messages, waking up to feel as though there might be things that we need to attend to relationally, but also maybe feeling a little moody. And if not that, it's just that, that shift of energy, it's going to bring us into a little bit more of a tender, sensitive space, which Mercury stays in Cancer until July 1, and Venus will stay in Cancer until July 11. So yeah, Mercury and Venus being square to Neptune at the start of the week. Just be as clear as possible in the way that you engage with other people. Be aware that you'll be more energetically sensitive. I would say that because the sun is getting ready to square Neptune, that is going to be exact on Thursday, June 20th, but we'll feel it building on Wednesday and maybe even on Tuesday. So this week we have a sun square to Neptune, and I think that that is much more important than Mercury and Venus square to Neptune. But because it's all happening at the same time, we want to be careful of the way that we engage. On Sunday, there's like conversations that I've been wanting to have with certain people, but I have specifically chosen to wait because I don't particularly know how I feel. And I feel as though if I were to speak now, that I don't think that I would have a full hold over what I actually am perceiving. As I was saying, Sun square to Neptune building to Thursday. It's kind of like this whole week is going to have a little bit of that layer, that filter, that we might not see the whole picture. So even though when we have squares to Neptune, we can think of deception, we can also think about the ways that we're being invited to look at something from multiple perspectives. And there's a way that like we are able to have deeper healing during this period of time. And so we can now creatively look at situations that came up last week, right? Mercury square to Saturn, Sun and Venus square to Saturn. It was like, looking at harsh truths and maybe we were just like, fuck that person, or like, fuck this, or no. Like those are very Saturnian things that we can say about, whatever situation we're in. But now that Neptune is more of the flavor for this week, it is a very real invitation for us to look at something with a lot more softness, with a lot more creativity, and also like taking away the need to be right. And I think that that's actually very valuable, is that when we relieve ourselves of being correct, there's so much more that becomes available. And I would say that that's really valuable for this particular week, because if we try to establish a hard truth on something this week, it will probably be knocked over on its side, or we will be building a foundation on something that was maybe not too stable of an ideology. But in terms of the media that you consume, I think that this is an important week to be aware that propaganda is possible. I also noticed that, just on a very practical level, when there's squares to Neptune, like a big part of my process this weekend was kind of wanting to make a decision like, oh, I'm going to work out for a little bit, then I'm going to work on my podcast, then I'm going to study, then I'm going to cook. And then what would end up happening is like nothing. None of that would happen because I was just genuinely confused about what felt right. And so that is a little bit of that process that occurs when Neptune is rearing its many faces. And this is all probably pretty good advice because the full moon that happens at 1 degree and 7 arc minutes of Capricorn on Friday, June 21st at 6:07 p.m. Pacific. This is a full moon that is square to Neptune. Damn it. And the solstice point, which is also, we can use that as divination for the upcoming quarter. That moment that the sun enters 0 degrees Cancer, that sun is very much square to Neptune as well. So, in addition to what I've been saying about Jupiter and Gemini, it's kind of like a year where we have to be very careful about the way we consume media because of deception and the dispersing of misinformation. Wow. Like doing divination, we have to kind of take all these different layers that essentially say the same thing. But, this is important because in 2020, a big part of what was happening collectively was that not only was it a pandemic, but it was this pandemic that was, the node square to Neptune, which also was like, we don't even have the information that we need to support us right now. There was a lot of misguidance that was happening from the CDC and from the government. And so anyway, this is why astrology is helpful, y'all. We just have data that will support us in kind of being able to make decisions that are actually aligned for us, right? That full moon that happens on July 21st, the other full moon in Capricorn, it is very much conjunct to Pluto. So we have this first full moon this week square to Neptune. We have the other one that's going to be conjunct to Pluto. It's a very specific type of sandwich that contains very different types of ways of dispersing information. I'll just leave it there because I don't want to make this super heavy. I'm sure that y'all are tuning into the forecast so that you can get tidbits for yourselves. But, at this day and age, like we are completely interwoven with what is happening on that collective level. So yeah, whether you're me and you want to change your name or you're you and you want to change your nationality or whatever that means for you to look deeply into your point of origin. And I think that that's really what happens when we are at the height of the summer, right? It's not only is it Cancer season, which is like we're having a good time at the beach if we're in the Northern Hemisphere or whatever, but we're also kind of starting to get into that space of thinking about the year because, the reason why Cancer season is a water sign is because we're starting to move into a time of deeper reflection, right? It's like the climax of the maximum daylight is starting to wane, right? Just as the moon will start to wax and wane over the course of a month. And yeah, so even though we're in the height of the summer, we're also in this state where our bodies are starting to reflect. And I think that that's just the fact that there are 2 Capricorn full moons. I hate when people make a big deal about this. But I think in the context of this year where we're having these elections and a lot of us don't even know what to do in terms of like, are we voting? Are we just saying fuck it to everything? I mean, like it's hard to just say fuck it at this time because fuck it means that we're going to be forfeiting our rights. So interestingly, what I was saying about last week is like, get your facts straight. I guess that was like a pretty good title because like this week we're just really needing to deepen, to get clear. And because of Saturn getting ready to station direct, it's just going to be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of us feeling this heaviness. So my friends, that is my message for you this week. There's a lot to think about. And that's what the astrology is saying too. There's a lot to think about. So a few things about me. I have a few more bottles left of my herbal formulas for 2024. And I have something that I created a few weeks ago. And it is a digestive tonic. And this tonic is so amazing. If you're interested in that, just shoot me an email. I'm going to be promoting it in the following week, but I will start getting ready to bottle them up. And this digestive tonic is something that is like a digestive bitter that you can take before meals, but it also is supportive for deepening in your thought process. It is something that will help you to understand more deeply. So there's an emotional component to it. There's a little bit of like an anti-parasitic quality, and also something that will relieve dampness. So like I feel like this is a digestive tonic for 2024 because we have relative amounts of dampness from like, post-COVID things. And then just the ability to really calm the nervous system. So I love this formula a lot. I've been working with it for a good portion of this year, and I'm super excited to have made like a huge batch for people. As I said again, the mentorship program, I'm still taking applications for that. And if you're interested in a reading, feel free to check out my consulting page, oakastrology.com, and then all my other teaching offerings on oakastrologyschool.com. Thank you, y'all, and bless.